Hello and welcome to our presentation. We are Group N, Muhammad Al-Mutari, Muhammad Usman, Bartha Brownie. The topic of this presentation is about the peak strength, shear strength, and internal frictional angle. The aim purpose is to study the effect of cyclic loading and how changes the soil strength. In this presentation, the main focus will be on peak shear strength and changes in internal friction angle. Cyclic loading can be used to describe how a material body responds to being subjected to stress and strain over time. One of the most well-known cyclic loading scenarios in a soil deformation occurred during an earthquake. The term earthquake is the movement of seismic waves that originate underground and, in most circumstances, concentrating plate tectonic. These seismic waves, which come in many different forms, impose on the dirt irregular and unpredictable small and large-scale motions. It is typically being aware that an earthquake can entail major threats to population centers, deaths, injuries, damage to property and infrastructure, and occasionally catastrophic repercussions. Therefore, it is highly important to research the material properties of soil. It is critical to comprehend how the soil might affect seismic waves, commonly termed side effect, as well as the impact the seismic waves may have on the soil's properties. The shear strength obtained from standard manometric tests is much higher than the failure strength in soft clay, because the effective stress approached the failure surface after a certain number of cycles under a state axial strain, a completion, and the rapid production of excess pore water pressure resulted in failure. Clay's stress strain characterized under repetitive loads is not linear because of nonlinear hysteresis behavior of soft clay.
Aim and objective of project. Our main aim is to study soil strength in case of cyclic loading. Our objective is to investigate the following experiments. One of them is the dynamic cycling triaxial test, and another one is pile soil interaction in loose sand. Problem identification. Soil particles experience displacement, rotation, and deformation under cyclic loading, which results in structural stress in soil. Cyclic movements leads to softening and surrounding soil and reduction in soil resistance. Pile foundations are subjected to cyclic loading due to effect of wind, wave, or traffic movement, which affects strength as well as stiffness of loose sand. So it is important to investigate soil strength under cyclic loading. Dynamic cyclic triaxial test. This method can generate cyclic shear loads at various varying frequencies ranging from 0.02 Hz to 15 Hz. The heights of the hollow test specimens are ranging from 130 to 200 millimeters. Inner diameters of the specimens between 40 to 70 millimeters, and the exterior diameters ranging from 70 to 100 millimeters. Shear stress can be determined when specimen is being tested by the following equation. Here is the complete assembly of cyclic triaxial test which is used in the experiment, and the brown one in the diagram is soil specimen used in the test.
Second method we use is pile soil interaction in loose sand. It has two models. First one is BEM boundary element model, which uses a P multiplier technique to incorporate group effect, but this method is over predicted. And the other one is FEM finite element method. It incorporates stress conditions using Abaqus software, and this method is under predicted. There is a complete assembly of the pile soil interaction for the loose sand. In the figure A, you can see a typical pile group under axial load with the pile cap on the top. And in the second figure, you can see the cyclic loading patterns against time. You can see it's a tangential curve. So moving to the results, we can see that the cyclic shear strain increases with increasing the number of cycles, and similarly it goes for the pore water pressure ratio, as it also increases with the number of cycle increasing. This graph you can see that we took 5 samples. Four were consist of clays with different percentage of gravel and sand, and the fifth sample was for pure clay. So you can see the difference in the graphs against the pore water ratio and number of cycles. A total number of cycles were 500. So we can conclude from our first experiment, the triaxial test, that shear strains above the failure limit of 5% dA when the extra pore water pressure rises continuously with each cycle until it reaches 55 to 60 kPa, which is lower than the effective confining pressure. When compared to the specimen with a less plasticity index and less cyclic shear stresses, the silty sample, which has a plasticity index of 14, has much greater cyclic shear strength. For the second pile soil interaction method, we can conclude that pile capacity is increased in this method, and pile head displacement is decreased, while the stiffening effects shown by the model against lateral cyclic loadings, and the results were found to be impacted by the relative density of sand samples. These are the references used by our group for the research purpose. Thank you for listening.